What an insane week. The Epic Games CEO has responded to the Epic Games Store criticisms. A leaked internal email from BioWare's studio head Casey Hudson has been shared, plus a whole bunch more in this rather insane episode of The Roundup. Hello everyone and welcome back to The Roundup, the twice per week gaming news show where we keep you caught up to date with all the most important industry stories. Of course, we have just on this channel today released a report highlighting Bethesda's rather egregious Fallout 76 update, and trust me, I really do mean that when I say it, and of course there's been a lot more in the channel over the past few days. It has been a crazy time. But even with that, we have a lot to cover today, so let's jump right into it. Let's kick it off with an update to the BioWare situation. Of course, given what we covered at the Anthem development video and the follow-up video covering their response, it has been a very rough time over there at BioWare. Their public response was frankly rather terrible. It seemed to brush things under the rug and reinforce BioWare magic. Well, that was just their public response, and today we have a very important update. Kotaku have got their hands on an internal email sent from studio head Casey Hudson to his staff. And this mail is a lot more real. It starts with Casey saying that he wants to share his thoughts on the Kotaku article and the discussion that has been raised. He then says this: "The article mentions many of the problems in the development of Anthem and some of our previous projects, and it draws a link between those issues and the quality of our workplace and the well-being of our staff. These problems are real, and it is our top priority to continue working to solve them." So there you have it. The studio head of BioWare has admitted that the problems in the article were real. It was, of course, always possible that Jason Schreier was going off disgruntled employees, focusing on that, ignoring counterpoints, and sort of furthering his own take on the issue, but I think that this statement does suggest that that is not the case. Seeing Hudson admit that the problems of Anthem and the previous projects are really quite down to the working conditions of staff and their, general clarity of purpose and all of that within the company, seeing him admit that is very refreshing, and it absolutely is what we want to hear. Hudson then went on to say that they didn't partake in the Kotaku article because that article named specific people, and they basically said that it is a personally traumatizing thing, for that to happen. Is that fair to say? Well, really, I can see both sides. Kotaku, in my view, did not lean hard into calling people out, at least, on a sort of personal basis. I think it did a decent job of including the names of the management people who were publicly there making decisions in a way that I think was required to tell the development story, but still, I do understand BioWare's perspective, with them being an employer. Now, Casey then went on to say that he returned to BioWare knowing there were significant problems with team health, creative vision, and other organizational challenges, saying that he is excited to drive improvements in those areas, but he said that he can't say he's done a great job, and especially that's not something that he feels on the day that he sent this email. He went on to say that they are taking steps to have a more focused studio mission and values so that they can have clarity. Casey said that they updated their structure around a matrix, not exactly sure what that means, so that department directors can be more fully focused on individual career support and well-being, and that they are better defining people's job roles so that people basically have more clarity within their job so they can succeed against better understood, more clear expectations. He then said they're also putting in place production changes that will provide a cleaner project vision, as well as significant post-production periods that will further relieve pressure and anxiety on teams during the development process. And you know what? That all does sound good. Of course, this stuff all needs to be backed up with action, and we'll only really know when their next games release, but those all do sound like positive things. Indeed, providing staff with a clear view of what they need to do is an extremely important thing. It really allows people to manage their work-life balance and just know how well they're doing. And when I look at my own work and that of my friends, and when things have fallen apart, usually that is something that highly correlates with a lack of vision and things being generally messy. And that usually is also something that correlates with crunch periods, which often are a mad, messy dash to the finish that really do come at quite a cost. Now, Casey did go on to say that there is much more to do and that he will talk in more detail about other actions that they're going to be taking at an all-hands meeting next week. And he ended by saying that he's committed to getting the studio in a better place and that staff are welcome to set up time with him in person to further discuss problems. And it's funny reading all of this. If BioWare's public response to this story had have just been to essentially share this email with people, it would have went far better for them. Unfortunately for BioWare, the tightly controlled corporate response only did harm. Ultimately, for me, I love BioWare games, Mass Effect especially. There is nothing more that I want than their staff having an excellent working life, being able to create games that they love, and for us consumers to enjoy those games. It is very important to shine a light on the development problems, as Jason Schreier did with this article, because they clearly hurt everybody involved. So I commend Jason for his reporting. Work like that reveals the problems in the AAA industry that are damaging to workers, damaging to consumers, and actually damaging to the companies themselves in the long run, who, in their short-sightedness for very short-term financial goals, seem to be willing to sacrifice a stable long-term future, which to many of us seems like a pretty darn clear problem that is responsible for really a lot of the disappointments that we've seen in the last few years within the industry. So that's it for the BioWare situation. Let's move on to Epic, because once more it is time to talk about the Epic Games Store. Why? Well, the CEO of Epic Games has somewhat opened up on the criticism of the store and the various allegations of it being Tencent-sponsored spyware. So, Tim Sweeney, the CEO, opened by saying that he supports everyone's right to complain about tech industry stuff, admitting that the exclusive games and the Spartan feature set are fine targets for ire. He then shared an article from US Gamer that talks about the spyware allegations. Tim talked about how he is a controlling shareholder in Epic Games and how Tencent are one of their investors but cannot dictate what they do as a company, likely because of Tim's controlling share in the company, and that Tencent do not have access to their customer data. He then went on to give some background on Tencent, talk about how their CEO and co-founders were big Unreal Tournament players back in the day, and how in 2012 Epic Games was looking to move into online games, which led to their current relationship with Tencent, because it is one of their areas of expertise. Of course, I would like to interject that that is one of their areas of expertise, but that also, network, etc. expertise also is, their deep collaboration with the government on surveillance, which, that is very much against the core principles upon which, say, the USA was founded, and therefore that is something that is understandably a big problem, especially for the US audience, but I'd say as well, the European audience too. Now, Tim's tweets continued. He talked about not regretting their relationship with Tencent, and he said that all of the big decisions are made in the USA and that he is 100% responsible for them. He ended by thanking those who have supported the store and saying that he reads and respectfully considers dissenting arguments, basically saying to keep it real, referencing the spyware allegations. Now, the spyware allegations are interesting. They are just that, but what we do know a lot more concretely is the relationships that Tencent have across gaming. Tencent own 5% of Ubisoft and Activision Blizzard, 40% of Epic Games, 100% of Riot, 80% of Grinding Gear, 84.3% of Supercell, and a majority stake in Miniclip and perhaps others, I'm not 100% sure. They are actually the largest gaming company in the world, so personally, even before we tackle the spyware allegations, that's just worrying to me. It is a large, consolidated power. That's not something that's good for the industry. I think that's typically pretty bad for competition, and when you look at, say, the problem of Chinese zombie companies, that's also an issue. And then, of course, it's Tencent. They're not a company with solid ethical grounding. Just, look at their collaboration, what they collaborate with, and I think most of us are going to have a pretty deep moral issue with that. Now, as for the spyware claims, well, okay, these first exploded on a Reddit post made by somebody who said that they were an amateur, and then in their post kind of went on to prove that saying amateur was a little bit generous. The programming Reddit debunked most of what he said with a facepunch.com forum post covering everything and providing a more learned take. Essentially, if this stuff is one's definition of spyware, then most of what you use is spyware. I heavily recommend reading the Facepunch forum post. So basically, things like what the Epic Games Store are doing are done by almost every Electron app. Of course, Electron is a cross-platform application framework that is used to make a lot of products and services like, say, Slack and Discord. A lot of the stuff you'll see with Epic, you'll actually also see with Discord and even with Steam, because Steam, like the Epic Games Store, is just a glorified website. And that means that there are just certain things with HTTPS, etc., that it kind of does and accesses with your computer, which were pointed out by the original Reddit post, but not really in a way that was in appropriate context. Now, of course, the most egregious thing that they were doing was the copying of the local config file from Steam. Now, that was explained by Tim. It is something we've covered on this channel before, but the way that, Tim basically explained how it was very hastily thrown together code, and to be completely frank, that's not acceptable from Epic whatsoever. So overall, the main takeaway is the Epic Game Store itself is rubbish. The features aren't there and the exclusives suck. Personally, I am very unhappy that they have this fantastic 88-12 revenue split, how that's such a good thing, but then they've kind of poisoned it with all of this negative stuff. It could have been a pure good, a pure game changer for the industry, especially great for indies. But they really managed to just mess it up by having all of these slightly evil-feeling things. So really, I just hope they wind down their exclusive plans as quickly as is possible and develop a more robust store. If they want to give people a reason to use Epic over Steam, then how about working with developers to have slightly deeper discounts? Maybe Epic could give up 5% of their cut, and the developer could give up 5% of theirs, giving people a 10% sale on, a new game, and that's still something that would have the devs coming out ahead of the Steam revenue split. At least that would be a way of the developers having a benefit that is also passed down to the consumers, which would be a win-win situation for everyone. Then as a final addition to this story, we have also now seen the Borderlands franchise be review bombed on Steam, of course with Steam reviews really acting as the most immediately kind of I suppose metric-based, sort of visually displayed way to express one's discontent with what the franchise is doing, and really that just shows us the backlash to Epic Games Store exclusives very much is continuing, and I just hope they decide to wind them down sooner rather than later. Okay, next let's move on. We actually have some good news. Rage 2 has cheat codes. People were initially very worried. Of course, we're really becoming used to what used to be a cheat code actually being a microtransaction. Well, the good news here is that Rage 2 cheat codes are all going to be unlockable in-game. While this is not a massive story, I think it's very important to call out when things are done right, and this absolutely is something being done right. Next, we have an update on Microsoft and PC gaming. So right now, Microsoft Game Bar is really not that great. It's kind of more annoying than anything, but we have actually just seen Microsoft roll out testing for an updated version that, actually seems pretty good. Indeed, it seems significantly better than Steam's overlay in a few areas. So it has a capture area for screenshots, it has a number of social features tied into the Xbox platform, as well as Spotify integration, and this is the bit that I like, built-in CPU, GPU, and memory performance graphs. Which is really nice to see. Hopefully this is just the beginning, but yeah, as I said, it's nice to see, especially as we're also seeing Microsoft reaffirm their commitment to PC gaming with the future release of the Halo Master Chief Collection, which seems to be entering its initial testing on PC this very month. Then next up, DICE and EA have released the Battlefield 5 microtransaction store. Frankly, it's rubbish. If you want a full walkthrough of it, then I'd recommend checking out Jack Frags' video on the topic. But there really is not much to say here. It is entirely what you would expect, just that none of the skins are interesting. And that is itself an interesting topic, because it very much is not what they first had planned. The original vision of Battlefield 5 had immersion-breaking, near steampunk-looking cosmetics. Now, these things would have made a lot of sense, given their plan to have a store. If you want your microtransaction store to work, you'll want your legendary quality skins to really stand out. Now, with Battlefield stepping back from its more outlandish vision due to player criticism, they are now stuck with a boring store that probably won't perform well financially. And if anything, I think it shows us the downsides of arbitrarily stuffing business models into games where they don't really belong. Battlefield has never really been a heavily progression-focused game. It typically has just been the game mode and the maps. That's really been the core of Battlefield for a very long time, having that absurd yet authentic feeling combined arms warfare. I don't know what microtransactions would have been a better fit for a free content live service version of Battlefield, but I do think DICE have ended up in a position where this game is going to continue to underperform. And to be real with you, I would just rather have a full price game and then buy a season pass if it meant that I'd actually get as many maps as I did with Battlefield 1, because right now Battlefield 5 has significantly fewer maps than Battlefield 1 did, with the rate of map releases being so slow that a year on, Battlefield 5 will have around half the maps that Battlefield 1 did a year on, which is just a messy situation, and I mean, yeah, sucks for Battlefield fans. Next, though, we have something super interesting from Ubisoft. They seem to have teased the next Assassin's Creed game from within The Division 2. This is something they actually did before with Watch Dogs 2. So in Watch Dogs 2, they had this mission where you would hack fake in-game Ubisoft and you'd steal a teaser trailer from them, just that it was a teaser trailer from real Ubisoft and a project they were actually working on. So it's a nice little thing. Now in The Division 2, there's a poster of a man wearing Assassin's Creed-like gear holding up a staff and a sphere that kind of looks like the Apple of Eden. It's styled somewhat like a retro travel poster with the text saying Valhalla, which I think quite clearly is a bit of a tease that we'll see something Norse-inspired from the Assassin's Creed series. Now, given their boating mechanics, their open-world prowess, and their kind of merging with mythology that they did with Odyssey, I actually think the Assassin's Creed Odyssey format would pretty much map on perfectly to that setting. Although, please, guys, just release a balanced game from launch and don't have the experience gain balance patch be on your in-game store, because that was a real scummy move. And then finally, to end this video on a bit of a high note, a quick update from The Division 2. And I'm more doing this just to point out how they seem to be doing things well. The next parts of their live service roadmap have been detailed and given their dates, with players getting the new title Basin Stronghold alongside some other additions today, with the 25th of April bringing the game's first 8-player raid, an assault on the Black Tusk faction's base. So importantly for me, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because they seem to be doing things right. And just like with the Rage 2 thing, even if it's not the most groundbreaking thing in the world, I think as much as we do need to exist to say, no, that is bad to certain business practices, as much as we do that, it's very important to also uplift things that are good and call out that they're good, because that does encourage that to happen more. And that's a really important function of, well, I guess press and punditry. So there you go, that is it for today's episode of The Roundup. Of course, well, the next planned video on this channel is on Monday. Who knows, there might be something over the weekend, and I really just want to end by saying thank you to all the people who have joined up over the last week. I think it's been like 6,000 people or something, which is just mind-boggling how fast it's been and how crazy the news cycle has been over the last week. We've had so many videos, and it's been a pretty mad time, but it's been a lot of fun. So yeah, really, to end today's video, I just want to say thank you to everybody, and yeah, with that, I will see you next time.